is really my color. Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be reflecting on what I've learned this week, and this week was about the integration of media in curriculum. First, let's look into the idea of environment. So we have the class and also the classroom. Now, what's the difference between the two? The class is actually a physical place, while the classroom is the people in the class itself. That's also the learning environment. So the learning environment is basically the two, the classroom itself, plus also the activities, the interaction with the students, so on and so forth. There are actually 7 components in the learning environment. The first one is the teacher. Here we call the teacher a teacher, but the teacher is actually a facilitator. This individual will help students and guide students in their learning endeavor. Rather than just pointing fingers at the student, the teacher actually gives instruction and give guide and give any assistance that the student might need. The second component is the monitoring component. The monitoring component here refers more towards assessment, either formal or informal. Personally, for me, the assessment that most people do know about is usually, the pen and paper test, but that's not really the case. It also includes things such as continuous assessment. Not only that, but the assessment here can also refer to the understanding of the student's background. What I mean about that is, you see, in Malaysia, we actually have something called the e-portfolio, where a teacher can continuously profile their students online for future reference, so that if there is any problems, they could solve it, they could help with any issues that the students have. The next component is the learner's component. This is pretty straightforward. It's basically how you are to teach these learners. There are several techniques and pedagogies that teachers can use to help the students. Things like constructivism in learning or inquiry-based learning can really help the students. The following component is the learning material. Every teacher knows about learning materials. It's basically anything given to the students to aid them in their learning. Then after that, we have the information sources component. Now, this is different from learning materials in the sense of learning materials are generally things that the teacher gives to the student, but then when it comes to information sources, it usually refers to sources in which the students can go independently and find out information on their own. So this includes things such as Google's, which is a normal one, so on and so forth. The next component is the tool component. Now, the tool component here refers to every single thing that is not information sources and also is not learning material. So these are things like, for example, in a class, if you have a presentation, you would generally have a PowerPoint, a projector, a screen. This will help in aiding learning with the student, especially in an experiential environment. Then after that, we have the school. School is very straightforward. We all know it as a place where we go to and all that type of stuff, but it's actually a learning platform. Everything can start from there. It is not necessary that it 100% has to be from the school, but most learning do come from that area. Okay, we have been talking about learning environments all the while. Now let's talk about conducive learning environments. Now, what is conducive learning environment? It's actually an environment that can help promote good learning within students. It focuses on production rather than learning. If you're creating a machine, right, instead of just looking at a video of how to create a machine, you actually go ahead and create the machine yourself. It's an extremely hands-on experience. Okay, as I've mentioned earlier, a conducive classroom environment is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But how do we go about it? Here are 7 ways in which we can do so. The first part, and the part where most people are pretty confused about, is discipline. Now, what I mean here by discipline is not that you go around taking a stick and whacking your students. What I mean here is that you have to provide some sort of structure where the students are kept in place, but at the same time feel like they are safe. Involve students in creating and implementing rules, and they will actually follow it because they made it themselves. Be fair with them, be firm with them, but don't be unreasonable with them. Another way in which class can be conducive is that, if possible, the teacher try to incorporate technology in teaching. Generally, by using technology, you can have a classroom that is more fun. It's not the case all the time, however, it can be the case. It is important to note though, I understand a lot of schools all over the world, especially in Malaysia, that come from rural area, they may not necessarily have technology such as computers, so on and so forth. A classroom is still able to function even without technology. Next, which I think is very interesting, especially in the case of Malaysia, will be physical environment. Now, why I find this very interesting is physical environment that is comfortable, that is bright, would generally have students feel happy or they feel like they want to learn. When I was in school, I could say that the environment was not conducive. Here are some pictures of some examples of classrooms during my time. Now, as you can see, they are pretty boring. But it has actually changed in the past few years. Here are examples of some of the classrooms that are currently in Malaysia. Beautiful, isn't it? It's so different to what it was in the past, and I find that absolutely amazing. I'm so happy that schools are finally taking notice of a conducive environment and changing. The next one is extremely important, and it's also something that I face and that I have problems with, which is psychological environment. In other words, the students must feel safe in the classroom. Unfortunately, a lot of times that's not really the case. Even for me personally, I've been in classrooms where it's not per se that I didn't feel safe, but I've always felt like I was threatened constantly by the teacher. And it's not threatening in a way they wanted to hit me or anything, but it was more threatening in a way they kept on telling me that, oh, you're going to lose marks, oh, you're a horrible student, oh, this and that. And it in classes as such, even as an adult, I've always felt that, oh no, this is so uncomfortable, I don't want to continue on with this class, which is the same for students that we teach. So I think as teachers, we should try to make the physical environment good for them. Culture is also extremely important. Different students have different cultures. As teachers, we have to respect them. We have to respect where they come from, and we have to we have to understand that, oh, all these things are extremely important. And even as adults, it's important to us, so what more to sensitive children. The next one, most teachers know, we know it as motivation, but if you're in any sort of educational line, you know about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So motivation is extremely important in your classroom. Obviously, you would prefer intrinsic motivation to extrinsic, but one can lead to another, and it's important as teachers for us to encourage it in our students. We must constantly tell them, hey, you can do it, instead of belittling them down, and we must constantly try to help them to achieve a better them. And then the last one, multiple intelligence. Most of us know that when it comes to multiple intelligence, one shoe does not fit all. Every student will learn in a different way. Every student will have something they are good at and they are bad at. As teachers, we have to consider this, and we have to consider where they come from and how we are going to help them achieve a goal, even with their different learning styles. By doing so, you can help students develop a sense of accomplishment, and then motivation, which was what we mentioned earlier, and then eventually it will help with allowing for self-confidence. Now, as a teacher, coming from a degree and coming from experiences where I've taught, I've always known about these components and ways to make a good learning environment. I came from a time where a lot of this was not studied. Like I mentioned earlier, when it came to my classroom or when it came to being threatened by my teacher, the thing is, I've always kept in mind how these things can help students, and I feel like most teachers should. I do think, especially in the context of Malaysia, there are some things that we should really consider, specifically the psychological climate. Even today, like Malaysian teachers tend to have this need and want to threaten left, right, and center. Like, for example, you're not going home, or your mom's gonna hit you, or I'm gonna tell your mom, or you're never going to survive, you're gonna be a rubbish collector, or whatever. And I guess I don't know whether it's an Asian culture, but I do feel like that is one of the things that right now, as future teachers, we should look at ourselves and think to ourselves, to not be like that. Okay guys, that's so much for my reflection. There's not much for me to talk about. So let's continue on to the next section of this video. Hey guys, want to just drop in real quick and talk about some of the links that I'm sharing today that is in the description below. First one is 25 easy ways to use technology in the classroom. The reason why I'm sharing this is basically because I find it very interesting. There are a lot of ways to use technology in the classroom. Some are the very usual ones, like for example using videos for mini lessons, but some are more interesting, like playing podcasts, or even, as you can see here, quiet a noisy classroom. So I believe that this would really help any teachers, especially teachers in training. Now, the second one is the characteristic of a highly effective learning environment. This is by Teacher Todd. Now, the reason why I shared this particular link is, if you look at the bottom here, it's very specific in the way it describes how you can create a highly effective learning environment. The last one is on this, which is by The Advocate. The title is Focus on these 4 areas to create a classroom environment conducive to learning. Now, if you look at all these 4 things, like physical space, getting students to cooperate, creating a communal atmosphere, and classroom and climate culture, is actually very similar to what I mentioned in the video. However, I just thought that I should share this link so that you will have extra reading material. Okay, basically that's it for the link, guys. Anyway, that's all for my YouTube video, guys. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please tell Dr. City that I'm a amazing student. Thanks guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.